Chapter 9 The Long Arm of the Law. Draco was standing triumphantly over the ashes of the little prince, while Ron looked about very worriedly. He had not expected to die so young. He would miss his godfather so much. Hey Draco, we should leave this dead boy behind us, Ron whined. He's probably going to get mad at us. I don't know what he'll do now. He turned, looked across the hall, and saw Fred sitting in a doorway, staring at the little boy's ashes. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded. Oh, Ron, Fred said sadly as he looked down at the boy's ashes. I'm doing my job, Ron, and not wasting any more time. Yeah, alright, Ron said in a huff. But what job? He asked in an annoyed voice. Fred rolled his eyes. Ron, do you know what we do for the Ministry of Magic? He was silent for a while. We're the Death Eaters and everything. A sudden flash of recognition flashed across Ron's face as the little boy's name appeared. Oh my god, it's the little prince's name. Isn't it? It's so obvious, he exclaimed. The boy is named Tom Riddle Jr. That means something. Draco smiled and nodded in understanding. He's the son of Lord Voldemort and his wife Dolores Umbridge. He's supposed to kill Harry Potter and kill everyone he encounters, and he's never met anyone that he didn't believe was a dangerous monster. That's why we got along so well. I'm really glad to know this, but how come my brother is a Death Eater? Ron demanded. No reason whatsoever, Ron, Fred said in a rather exasperated voice, but it explains why we both were good at our job. Me and Tom have known each other forever. We both have strong belief in the Death Eaters, and we both believe our work is important. I knew he was a Death Eater. I just didn't know it existed in the first place, Ron muttered, his voice becoming more irritated. Draco sighed and looked Ron straight in the eyes. Weasley, please, no one is safe. You cannot let the Death Eaters live, not to mention all the other idiots that would do harm. He looked into Fred's eyes and whispered, Do not look away. Don't talk. I cannot let you leave. You will not get out alive. Ron's expression changed from bewilderment to confusion as he tried to figure out just what the hell was going on. The whole ordeal was making him uncomfortable, and if anything, he felt more frightened. As he watched in fascination, Draco and Fred both waved their wands and began casting spells. What do you think you're doing? Fred exclaimed in a voice that almost seemed sarcastic. He cast a stunningly powerful hex, shattering one of the chairs on the couch and knocking over another. Oh, I just don't know. Maybe I'm fighting for the man I love. Maybe I'm fighting for my friends? Who knows? Draco looked at Fred and cast a Patronus, taking on the form of a large bird and flapping his wings in the air. We can always find out by looking at the birds, he added to Fred's bewilderment. And if we do? Fred inquired in a voice so dry it almost sounded like a pity. He couldn't think of the last time he had seen any bird. Two men began circling the room, searching for furniture. It was an intense sight, and if anything, made them less than pleased. Both Draco and Fred launched an endless array of spells at each other, hoping at each other's expense. Ron, now thinking of Hermione's apartment, could barely get out of his mouth when he began muttering, What the hell is going on? And then a moment later, I have no idea what's going on. With those words, Ron's expression turned into one of intense fear, and he dropped his wand. This is stupid. Oh, I think it's quite brilliant, a voice said from beyond the couch. Two men froze in place in their chairs. A long, dark line of magical power shot from the door into their room, lighting up the room. All the lights in the room went out, and they all watched as a spectral figure appeared, floating in midair. Its body was made of glowing red and purple light, with tiny green eyes that seemed to stare back into the darkness. Do you understand who this is? It whispered. Ron tried to think of who it was, but nothing would come to him, and then he had a thought. Oh, are you the boy who lived? The specter spoke with a voice of magic that was somehow familiar and magical. No, I am not the boy who lived. I am the prince who traveled through time to kill you. I am the Lord of the Dark. I am the little prince, Tom Riddle Jr. You are nothing more than pawns in my plan. It is my will that I rule the world. I will destroy you all. I will make you slaves. I will give you everything I've lost. If it means your life, then it is what I will give to you. What? We won't do it, Draco said with a shrug. Ron nodded. But what do we do then? Chapter 10. Harry is not dead. Deep in the Hogwarts morgue, Harry Potter was still breathing, though his heart had already stopped beating. After an instant's contemplation, Harry decided that in the event that the heart stopped, he should be kept alive in some sort of heart chamber for a while longer. so he decided to take out one of his many healing charms to help him stay alive longer. This had been a great gamble for his future. His future life with Draco. Harry Potter opened the small vial and immediately felt a wave of relief as an enormous amount of magical energy was transformed into his body. He felt the power come into him in waves, from each new wave until it was a complete storm. As the wave of power swept over his body, he felt a small wave of happiness begin to overtake him, but it was short-lived. Harry's body quickly felt the intense magical pain, and he was unable to move an inch. "What in God's name? I feel like a fucking moron!" Harry screamed. "Well, you should have been more careful with the magic this time, and your wand wasn't exactly powerful enough for such an intense magical charge, and your robes weren't particularly light enough," Hermione said from across the room. She rolled off the bed, revealing the long-tailed owl she had been hiding under her pillow. She held it at a 90-degree angle. Harry had no idea how she managed to hide an owl under the pillow. It was obviously a good thing. Hermione seemed to have her own plan and had been the one to get the owl's attention. "Well, it's actually the time for me to get out of here," she said. Hermione looked at Harry and gave him a sympathetic look. The owl stared at her and then turned. It was a simple white owl with black feathers perched on its chest. It was about 8 feet tall. "Would you like to ride on my owl up?" "We're going to get caught in this mess," Harry said quietly as the owl slowly lifted up. The owl slowly raised its head and turned before it vanished. The morgue was empty of owls. "What do you think?" Hermione asked curiously. "It's an invisible owl." The owl's eyes twitched as they looked at her. "That looks a little suspicious," Harry said nervously. "This is a really strange owl." "Don't worry, no one can see it." She helped Harry onto the owl's back. "Goodbye, morgue. I'll call you later if you want to talk to me." With that, they flew the owl's body through the air. Harry was surprised. The owl would never fall. "The owl's got eyes and he can see," Harry thought to himself. Hermione's invisible owl flew over the Great Hall, with Harry and Hermione standing on top of it. When it finally landed in the middle of a large table, Hermione said, "Come on, everyone, let's see who wins. Harry Potter will win." Harry and Hermione looked at each other and nodded to make the table. Harry looked at his watch. It wasn't too late. At least he was starting his night early. He would get into the Hogwarts common room, change into his clothes, take his wand, and look out the window for a good hour or so, then walked into the common room and walked up to Tom Riddle Jr., stand him up to look him in the eyes and tell him that the day has come for him to die. Hermione got off the owl as quickly as she was able, but after an uncomfortable silence for a moment, she said, "I guess we should get going. I wonder how Ron's day has been. Do you think it was a good idea to put him through the ordeal? I mean, I know Ron's a bit of a prat, but he's good about being polite, you know." Harry looked at Hermione. "I know that he has trouble taking orders when he comes home, and he probably doesn't want to talk to me about it, so I'm pretty confident that he can handle it himself. I'm sure he's going to be fine." Harry smiled when he thought about it. Good old Ron was going to be okay after all, and Draco Malfoy wasn't going to be upset by anything. Chapter 11. Tom Riddle's Last Duel. Draco smirked. He had known of this particular scenario a million times. This was his time. It was going to happen. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid that it would all end, that he would be left on the sidelines watching while his friends died or got turned into a living snake. Draco knew this would be bad. There would never be a peaceful ending. He held his wand close to his chest, trying to calm the storm inside him. The specter of the little prince spoke to Draco again. "I want you to learn that in order to accomplish everything you want, you will have to die in a way that will not leave you alive to learn the secrets of life. Your soul will be cast away from you, like all that has been consumed by the power of the dark." Draco chuckled. He was not a man to lose to a small boy. You know, if you were not in a certain way evil, there wouldn't be anyone who wanted to do you harm. Maybe they just did not like you. Maybe they hated you. Maybe they had no idea what you could accomplish if you were given the proper amount of time to learn magic. Draco's voice was very gentle. If all you wanted was to have the freedom and the opportunity to become the person that you were always meant to be and to live your dreams, you would be much happier without the death of those around you. But I guess you're a sad, lonely guy, aren't you? Draco laughed and shook his head. His wand was glowing with a faint blue light. It was a familiar shade of violet. Tom grinned in satisfaction at Draco's comment. "Well, I do think he is an amusing and quite humorous fellow." Tom's smile had grown wider. He raised his arms, and magical spells began to form around him. He made a few gestures with his fingers and formed a ring of magic around him. and his arms started to glow bright red. He looked up to see Draco with an open mouth, and was surprised to see that Draco had begun to laugh in his face. Tom then realized he was actually holding Draco's wand, and felt a slight thrill in his chest. "Oh look, I have your wand now." Tom looked down at Draco and let out a satisfied sigh. Draco's eyes began to shine with light, and his face grew more radiant. "Who says I need a wand?" Draco replied, his smile turning slightly wicked. "I have the power." Neither wizard wondered where Ron and Fred were right then. They couldn't hear them or see them at all. The Weasley brothers were sitting on the living room couch, drinking red cups of tea. Ron eyed his brother with a sad look. "Mom's always saying that she had a bad case of twins. She didn't think you were the cause. I mean, how are you going to make her laugh if you're a Death Eater?" Ron frowned. Fred's eyes were narrowed as he looked up to his brother. "I can see your points." Fred laughed. "But then again, there was a time she got us all stuck under a lake for 7 years, with all the magic in her house, while she tried to sneak in the potions that she wanted. I wonder how much she was able to use. And there was a time I caught her and Lucius in an attack that killed 4 people and took over 1,000,000 lives." Ron looked over at Fred. "There were worse things she could have done that I've known of." Fred took a drink and shrugged. "It was in the war, though, so she had all sorts of bad memories of it. We really got a proper war story. I think my grandfather went into the war as a fighter pilot and won, so I'm just used to stuff like that." Ron didn't say anything and leaned back over the couch. As he did so, Fred got up and came down from his chair. "It's just, I've never been inside any of the dungeons." "The dungeons?" Ron muttered under his breath, as Fred began to get up and walk. "Yeah, the dungeons that we never used to get into." Fred sighed and picked up his glasses. "I suppose I never quite got why that was. I've been in there a lot, and it gets cold in there sometimes. The dungeons are not nearly as good as they used to be, so I haven't been inside as often in a while." Ron said with a sad smile. "So this whole Death Eater thing just came across as such a big waste, really. Why can't you just go back to being like all the other kids that are just like us?" Fred snorted. "What? I'm not that big of a kid. I'm just kind of like a normal teenager. If I wasn't a Death Eater, I don't think I'd have ever done any crime. I know you want to do something about it, though." "I'll let you know how things go," Ron grinned. Out in the hall, they heard Harry's voice shout in surprise. "What the hell is that?" Ron's eyes lit up. "The boy who lived! Sorry, Fred, I need to tell you to shut up now." Before his brother could respond, Ron waved his wand again, and the air went crazy. Fred was caught off guard, and the air erupted with a magical power that made his body go stiff. He stood still for a long time as Ron ran to Harry. The scene in the Chamber of Secrets was one Ron had seen before, filled with an incredible amount of magical power, and no one was safe. Prince Tom Riddle was standing behind the barrier that separated him from everything and Harry Potter, the boy who killed him. He was standing next to Draco Malfoy in the midst of this new magical world. There was a very dark, silent, beautiful smile on Draco's face as his wand flared with magic to kill a specter, an angelic creature that had always terrified Ron. "Avengers!" Harry exclaimed as Harry fired a bolt of lightning at the dark creature that had soiled Draco's mind. Harry was the starry light, and he was holding his own. Its power was as unstoppable as if there was no god at all, and the prince just hovered there with a strange, evil smile on his face. Across the room, Hermione Granger had just finished casting a Patronus charm to summon her mother's spirit in the form of a tiny, red glowing woman. There was so much magical power, and no one was safe. Hermione noticed Ron watching her from afar, and she smiled at him. "I didn't expect this. I suppose you'll have to forgive me." And she cast a charm on her own hand, making it invisible. "We aren't dead, though, Ron." The evil specter was just laughing at all the children trying to kill him. They couldn't hurt it because it was a wizard, and all wizards have some sort of magic that can protect them from harm. It wasn't a charm, but one of those spells you had seen on some movie. "The Dark Wizard is back!" shouted the specter with his tongue out. "He's here!" His laughter echoed in the school. Ron had been listening, but had only been able to make sense of one thing. His friends at Malfoy couldn't kill a spirit. Hermione had only thought that she could, because her parents were still alive. But that was another story. Harry and Draco had fought hard, and both were alive, but it seemed like there wasn't much they could do against the curse of the specter. It was up to Ron to save them. Ron raised his wand. "Hey guys," he shouted at 4 people he knew. "Get down on the ground if you need to. I'm going to finish this one myself." Malfoy looked at Ron in amazement, and then smiled with pride at his friend, and turned to face Harry, taking his hand and pulling him down. Come on, Potter, it's going to be fun. The little prince grinned at Ron with an air of confidence. You think so? Well, come on, it's a school day after all. Let's get this over with quick. With a slight swing of his wand, the Spectre lifted his body up to the ceiling of the chamber and cast an instant wave of green light. Ron took a deep breath, closed his eyes. Yeah, okay. As he swung his wand around, he began to sing the chant that he practiced since he was little. The Ron song. The boy who lives, the sun that sets, and the moon never shines. And every day he takes the moon, we will be one again. It's Ron. Ron Weasley. His eyes were red and burning like they never left the fire. His blood-red hair shone like it burned up on the darkest night. And his voice was filled with rage and fear. But it wasn't just his voice that was fierce. It was the whole of his soul. Ron was burning. His hands were filled with fire. Ron was boiling. Ron was boiling like the night. I'm not the boy who lives. I'm not the one who was born. I'm the man that never leaves. I'm the man that never knows. My fire burns so fiercely. I'm Ron Weasley. This is the Ron that I love. The blue and green of the sky began to fade, and everything around them was transformed. The entire Chamber of Secrets was covered in a dark, swirling mass of darkness that was much more intense than Ron's usual magic. When he finished his song, the whole chamber was completely silent. All around him was a sea of dark purple and flames that seemed to come from nowhere, but slowly gathered and coalesced into an enormous pillar of black smoke that rose up in the sky above them. Then everything went dark.